Hello, my name is Julie, and I'm going to be reading the lowest rated books on my TBR. So this is part of a series where I am reading the lowest rated books on my TBR and the highest rated books on my TBR. I don't know which one's coming out first. I am going to go onto my Goodreads shelves and I am going to find the top 3 and the bottom 3 books by average rating on Goodreads on my 2 TBR shelves. I have a shelf called Want to Read, which is books that are closer to the top of my TBR or I own them mostly, and then my Keeping an Eye Out shelf is more books that I have bookmarked for later, if you will. Usually these are books that I want to look into more, hear more reviews on. I will be only reading books that I can actually get access to. So other than that, I have 2 rules. I will only be reading 1 sequel. Also, I am only going to read 1 book per author. That way we get some variety and less bias. But let's cut to me finding out what I'm going to read. Alrighty, now is the time for me to find out what the lowest rated books on my TBR are. So this is going to work a little bit differently from when I did my highest rated. I have zoomed in so that all I can see of an upcoming book is the star rating below. As you can see, there's this 3.26, but I can't see what the book is, just barely. So I am going to start out with my Keeping an Eye Out shelf because I'm pretty sure, because a lot of the books that are lower rated, I eventually move over to there. But let's see. I'm gonna have to zoom in, but I am not looking. I'm gonna keep eye contact with you. Okay. And let's do Keeping an Eye Out. Not looking. I'm zooming. Okay, ooh, goodness, that's a new release. Okay, let me zoom in a little bit more. All right, I actually saw that the next one is also Paul Tremblay, which, whoops. And let's pull up my Want to Read shelf in another tab. That's a 0. That book hasn't come out yet. Ooh. So, okay, we saw that the first book on here is The Pall Bearers Club by Paul Tremblay. This is fascinating because this book just came out. There's somebody's memoir that they've written, and then somebody else who knows them, who is written about in that memoir, is writing in the margins of that book. This is something that I'm really interested in. Definitely didn't think I was going to be picking it up soon. Next book in my wanted to read is lower. So that book is, I did actually see it, but is Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Eric LaRocca. This is a book that I saw at Barnes & Noble and was like, oh my god, this cover is so amazing, I should get it, but I didn't want to pay full price for it because it was so tiny and I had never heard of it before. And then like a month later, it blows up on BookTube and Bookstagram and everywhere, and I really wanted to read it, but then this copy has since gone out of print. You cannot find it anywhere. So I don't know how I'm going to acquire this book. We'll see. So 3.2 is lower than 3.31. So we are going to look at what this one is. Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. I just bought this book because I think it's going to be a 5-star. I don't actually have it on me this second, but this is a book that is about the apocalypse, but it goes out of its way to not mention the apocalypse, which is so exciting to me. Okay, we'll see. Why am I excited about this? And all of these books are like horror weird. I think I'm pretty happy with this TBR. So we have our 3 books. The lowest possible rated book on my TBR was Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoke by Eric LaRocca. This is a short horror novella that has since been published in a short story collection, but I will specifically be reviewing this short story because that's the one that I'm interested in, and that is what has such a low rating. Although I will be reading the entirety of the collection because I have an arc of it. As this is a short horror, there's not a long synopsis, but this is about 2 women who meet in a chat room at the beginnings of the internet, and their obsession with each other goes into weird places. That's all I know. That's all I want to know. The second lowest rated book was Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. This is a literary horror that is about a family that checks into an Airbnb, and then the family that actually lives there comes back to the Airbnb because the apocalypse has begun. And I have had mixed reviews of this, obviously. One person that I watch and trust loved it. One person that I watch didn't really like it that much, but this goes out of its way to avoid talking about the apocalypse. So I think that this could be a literary horror that I am into, or it could be really boring. Who knows? And the one that surprised me the most, the third lowest rated book on my TBR, The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. This is a brand new release, and it is about a guy who is writing a memoir about his teenage years in the 80s and his friendship with this girl when they met when he formed the Pallbearers Club, where they were doing community service by being pallbearers for people who didn't have any. Kind of the idea behind this is that we have Art Barbara has his memoir, and then in the margins, the friend that he is talking about was sent the memoir and is making comments in the margins. So he is making some claims, she is making other claims. So this is another, it has a bit of horror in it, but it's not about that. I think all of these are books that I have a really good chance of liking. Obviously they were on my TBR, but if I had to order them in how I think that I'm going to like them, I think I'm gonna like Things Have Gotten Worse, and then Leave the World Behind, and then The Pallbearers Club. Let's start off with our first book, Things Have Gotten Worse. Remember when I said this was gonna be a vlog? It's hard to vlog books when you can read them in one sitting, and that's exactly what happened with Things Have Gotten Worse since we last spoke. First of the month, I literally just sat down and finished this entire thing in a sitting. Since I got this from the library, I was actually approved for the ARC of the collection that this is now going to be published in. This is the thing that has the lowest rating on my TBR, but I am going to be reading the two other stories that are connected with this, just to have a little bit of vlog content, see if I thought the themes were sort of connected. If you liked one, you'll like the other, let's see. But what were my thoughts on this specific story? Like, that was my thought. My thought was, I don't know what I was expecting. First of all, I love queer horror. The horror genre has been so dominated in movies and in books by straight white male authors. Most of the horror, at least in books that I have been picking up, has been from female authors, from Black authors, from queer authors. Eric LaRocca identifies as queer and actively talks about the queerness in the horror that he writes. And I think that is the part that I liked the best, because this is two women interacting through a chat room in the early 2000s. We see this aspect of queerness that is a very real thing, that particularly in the early days of the internet, the only place where you can be queer is on the internet, the only place where you can really feel like you can be yourself. And so you have these people through the internet who you can be your truest self with, but that doesn't mean that the other person on the other side has the best intentions for you. That was definitely one of the seeds of writing this book. There's the type of horror that's supernatural, and there's the type of horror that is just real life terrible things that could happen, and the one that I predicted was wrong. It's the type of horror that doesn't necessarily scare the reader, but it's horrifying, and it scares the people who are in it. I don't think it's scary, it's gross. And it was just like, oh god, it was a lot. I do think this story could have been improved by being longer, which is always my apprehension when reading novellas. I usually think, why wasn't this turned into a full-length novel? Because I think that the relationship between the two characters could have been expanded upon. It did feel unnatural that like such a progression could happen over so little actual interaction. Also, I didn't plan this, but I'm kind of wearing the shirt. Two trends that I love in covers are on here. First of all, it's the blurring face or the like partially obscured face. I love that. That's what I mentioned. But also I love painted covers. There's been a lot that are like vintage looking painting covers, but this, immediately I want to pick it up. And like I kind of want to pick up his other novellas as well. But because I was kind of like, I think I'm gonna give this story like a 3.75. I saw a person whose reviews I trust also give it that and had similar feelings to me about this book. I have the other 2 stories that are going to be connected with this on my Kindle, so I can vlog me reading that, see if I have any reactions. Time to go do homework. Hello. Hey. How's it going? So right now I am currently scratching off stuff from my novel log. It's 100 books that you're supposed to read in your lifetime, whatever. I read classics, I read modern classics. The thing is, the pick that they give you, it was just not enough to scratch off some of these. Some of them were really easy, some of them were not, and I'm kind of like, did I get like a defective poster? I thought I would give this update while I'm doing this. So last night I read the other 2 stories that are in the collection of Things Have Gotten Worse. I liked Things Have Gotten Worse than the other 2 stories in this, and that had already been like a 5-star prediction, so even it being like a 3.5, 4-star was a disappointment for me, but the other 2 I straight up did not get. So the first one's called The Enchantment. There's this couple who is separated but not officially divorced yet. Recently, the first scientific evidence that there is no afterlife has come up, and then their son commits suicide, and his note says, "Hey, you have to stay together if you love me." And they end up going to this island to take care of this hotel, and this weird person shows up. And I almost started getting this, and then I didn't. Things Have Gotten Worse. I could talk about the themes, but this one, I was just kind of like, okay, what are we getting at? I thought with like the religious aspect of an afterlife, I would get something about like, oh, living for the present, or you should be taking care of others, or that sort of thing. I think there was a little bit of that, but I think I just kind of got lost in the rest of it. And then the other one, I think it was called You'll Find It's Like That All Over. And that's the shortest of the stories. And we have this man who finds a bone buried in his backyard that has the initials of his neighbor, who's a foreigner who he's not really talked to before. So he goes to his neighbor to try to figure out what's happening. This felt like somebody who had only ever read stuff that is taught in like a middle or high school English class tried to write a story. Like, it just didn't do anything new. I definitely think that Things Have Gotten Worse Since We Last Spoken was way stronger than the other 2 stories, which makes me question why this collection was made in the first place. Let's shout out my Waddle Dee that I made. I love him a lot. But that's my thought on the first of the lowest rated books. Do I think it deserves to be so lowly rated? Absolutely not, because it's just the story that I thought the best of the 3 stories that I read from Eric LaRocca. But I definitely 100% think it is overhyped in the book talk horror sphere. Hi, it's been 4 months since I started this highest rated, lowest rated series. Basically, the first 2 books I had to read immediately, and the other books I did not plan on reading immediately. And now it is January 2023, And here we are about to read my third book of a 6-book series. I do finally have every single one of the books. I'm hoping to read all of these by the time February's over, but who knows. But it is time for me to read The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. I'm really excited now that I have this because there's a bunch of different fonts, there's underlining. You look like someone who listens to Def Leppard. That was mean of me, even though it was true. Honestly, just kind of excited about it. It looks like something that I'll be able to get through really quickly, and I'm having decision paralysis when it comes to what book I'm gonna read next because I just finished Babel, which was my first book of the year, and it was fantastic. I might get into a slump if I don't pick something up immediately. So I'm going to be spending some time with my family today because I just got my first job out of college. I still have a semester to go, but I got my big girl job and we're going out to celebrate. But once I just dropped the book on the floor, once that celebration is over, I'm gonna start that and hopefully start editing. Okay, hi, it's the next day, and I did read like 40 pages of this yesterday before promptly passing out at 9 p.m. because of a melatonin incident. But Kayla, Books and Lala, if you watch me, you know her. I talk about her all the time. She just posted her best books of the year, and this was on it. It was number 2. She talked about how like she wouldn't recommend this widely and that the blurb is misleading and that this is a little bit more of like a general fiction than necessarily a horror. Both of these books are like literary with a little bit of horror, and they're both not about a whole lot. So interesting that both of these ended up showing up on this. I don't think it's a surprise at all that at the bottom of my goodreads would be horror and those types of books, because mystery thriller horror books are the most divisive star ratings. You're gonna love it or you're gonna hate it. My plans for tonight got canceled, which as an introvert is great, but I was looking forward to it. It's fine. So I'm hoping I should be able to get like halfway through this, as long as it is going to keep my attention. Just off the bat, Art Barbara, who is our main character and the author of this memoir, he is definitely pretentious. He's talking about his teenage years at the time, and he's kind of very woe is me about himself. And Mercy, who is the character who's writing in the margins, is absolutely calling him out on that, and I'm really enjoying it. Let's keep going. Hey, it's a couple days later. I didn't have a chance to read yesterday, but I have today and the day before. I'm still only 60 pages into this, and I'm picking up my ebook more than I'm picking up this. So I am going to give this more of an honest shot today. But honestly, so far, it's just not picking up my attention. It's not bad. I'm just not reaching for it. Hi, so I am now at page 200 of about 260 of the Pallbearers Club, and I'm still not obsessed, unfortunately. And I know that I could have DNF'd it. It is short enough, but I wanted to give it an honest try. The couple of moments that were horror kind of missed the mark for me. I've liked the commentary in the notes, but the overarching plot has not necessarily been for me. I think the music scene that we're now looking at is kind of interesting, but overall I'm not obsessed with our characters and their relationship, which I think is kind of part of the point of it. But hopefully I'll finish this up tomorrow. Hello friends, I am about to go to a Canes game and I'm working on crochet, but I just finished the Pallbearers Club. What did I think? Not a whole lot. I think the ending had a good little twist at the end, but it's something that I could have guessed from the very beginning. I much preferred Mercy as a character than I cared for Art. I had to force myself to keep reading this book. I had to section it into pages and everything, and this is the type of thing where people are like, oh, DNF, but I like to give books chances, and unless I think it's physically impossible for me to get through something like a library audiobook that I'm not going to be able to get back, I'll DNF it. But that's just not my tendency, and I just didn't really care about the characters, and I think the book's trying to say something and I just can't figure it out. So this one was a miss for me. I'm thinking of giving it like a 2.5 star, something like that. Cabin at the End of the World, I am interested in reading it because I think it's supposed to be more horror based, tribute to horror type deal, but I'm really not sure. I think this is a book that could struggle to find its audience. Maybe if you really liked House of Leaves, or if the writing in the margins just really works for you, sure, but like that was like the only good part of the book for me, and even then it just didn't save how bored I was the whole time. So right now I am working on making a book sleeve. So this is inspired by Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. This is supposed to be a dress. I'm working on it. It'll get better. I've already gone through a couple of design phases, but I'm likely going to pick up a book for my highest rated books next. So it'll be a minute before I see you again, but you'll see me right now. Hi, it's a couple weeks later. It is a very gloomy day and I have finished up all my responsibilities for the day. So that means I can start Leave the World Behind. I read like the first page or so before I decided, no, I actually do want to go to sleep on time. And I already really liked the writing style, or maybe the diction that was used. The epigraph right here says, love goes on like a bird song as soon as possible after a bomb. And then, well, the sun was shining. They felt that boded well. People turn any old thing into an omen. It was all just to say no clouds were to be seen. The sun where the sun always was. The sun persistent and indifferent. Roads merged into one another. The traffic congealed. Their gray car was a bell jar, a microclimate, air conditioning, the funk of adolescence, the rustle of debris, for there always was that. This writing style, which seems poetic, but also in the way that like horror can be, where it's also poetic but gross. Poetic in not a pretty way. It makes me really excited for this, and hopefully we will have a real win for this video, because this is genuinely a 5-star prediction for me. Hello, I'm here with Mom, and last night I read 150 pages, which is just over half of Leave the World Behind. So as you can tell, this has been very easy to get through. I mean, the text is pretty big, but I have been enjoying sort of the suspense and the writing style. First 50 pages is the family just enjoying their vacation, and then the couple who owns the house comes home and they're like, hi, something really terrible happened in New York. There's like a giant blackout all over the East Coast, and they just aren't getting any more information, and they're having to stay at this house together, and nobody really knows what's going on, but everybody's really afraid that something terrible is happening, but they're trying to ignore their own fear. So I've been really liking it so far. You're just waiting for the other shoe to drop, and I'm wondering if it will, or if we're supposed to just feel that suspense. But this was written before the pandemic, so this is unexpectedly a very timely book. but my class was canceled for today, so I just have a video lecture to watch. And then I am going to be touring my work facility tomorrow, so I need to drive there tonight. So hopefully I can finish this before I have to leave. Alrighty, it's about an hour later and an hour until I have to leave, and I have finished Leave the World Behind. Okay, first of all, I did like this. I did quite like it, and I feel like you can tell from the first chapter if this is going to be your vibe based on the writing style itself. It did get more in the horror realm than I thought it was. There's something going on, and all of these people are in this house and they do not have access to information. They don't know what's going on at all, and they want information, but they can't get it and they are afraid to go anywhere. So it's a little bit like their paranoia. How much of this is paranoia? How much of this is actual fear that they should have? And there are little hints in the narration that the characters don't know of things that are going on in the real world. If you're someone who needs everything answered, this might be unsatisfying for you, but I liked what this did. I didn't think I was going to get answers going into this, but I think I got just enough answers for this type of story. I would liken this to Station 11 a little bit. If that was your vibe, this is a shorter story that you might like. I thought a lot of the dialogue was really interesting. We had these characters who are having a conversation with each other, but each person is just carrying a different conversation. They are not listening to each other. I also liked that we have these two families, and they're not like having terrible family drama. Like, these married couples still like each other and have healthy relationships. The children are children and teenagers, but they, you know, still like their parents. And mostly this is just a sense of dread piling up. And I liked that. And I think that this was an interesting examination into what people do under these situations when you don't have information, and it's fear sort of taking over. Yeah, I really liked this, and I love what this color palette is doing. So I think I'm gonna rate this probably about a 4-star because of this low rating. Like, I don't know who I would recommend this to, but literary fiction with a little bit of horror generally is my vibe. So I finished out this vlog. What did we learn? Like we mentioned before, all of these books were short and they had some sort of horror element to them. That makes sense because a shorter book has fewer opportunities to entice the reader. They have a smaller margin of error that they are allowed. And then horror tends to be something that people either love or hate different elements of. I think these two could have a little bit of a lower rating because they suffer a little bit from a misnomer. Like, these, I don't know that the way that these are pitched are 100% how I would pitch them, and I will probably work on in my review making sure that these are correctly advertised. So I think that's partially why these haven't had their audience, but I think each of these books has an element that is divisive already. This book doesn't give you all of the answers. This one sets itself as a vampire story, but is coming of age and not a whole lot happens until closer to the end. And then things have gotten worse. I mean, it's gross. It gets really gross and goes from 0 to 100 real quick in a way that's not necessarily the most realistic. I sometimes gravitate towards lower rated books. Bunny is one of my favorite books of all time, and it was the lowest rated book that I read in that year. So I try not to rule out a lower rating, but I think that when a book does have a lower rating, I should look into why and give myself room to DNF, because I really should have DNF'd this book. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you've made it this far, let me know some low-rated books you love or want to read, and if you've read any of these, if you would like to follow me anywhere. My links are in the description, and now I do have a link to my Etsy shop, which at the moment you can get reader spreadsheets for just $5. I worked really hard on these. In the future, I should be putting some bookish crochet stuff on there, which will be fun. Again, thank you so much for watching, and as always, I will see you in the next one.